In this video, I'm sharing two stories that, to me, are genuinely disturbing. They come from deep in the Appalachian Mountains, and in both, someone was home alone when things took a dark turn. I've always found it especially unsettling when something happens inside your own home. And when you live in the woods, real endless woods like the Appalachians, it adds a whole other layer of fear. In the first story, it all starts with an open window and ends with a situation no one would ever want to be in. In the second, someone, or honestly, in my opinion, something, comes in from the woods. And what happens next is the kind of thing that makes you think twice before spending the night alone. As always, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments. I haven't been able to reply to everyone, but I do read them all. Thanks for watching. Now, let's get into the video. And remember, viewer discretion is advised. All of this happened over 15 years ago, back when I was still living with my parents and siblings. But no matter how much time passes, that night remains burned into my memory in a way that still affects me to this day, especially when I'm home alone at night. These days, I live in Wisconsin, but I was born and raised in Georgia, in a remote area of the Appalachian Mountains. To be completely honest, I never really liked living there. Maybe it was the constant weirdness in the air, whether it was strange sounds coming from the woods, or people who sometimes just seemed completely out of their minds. And anyone who lives or has ever lived in that region knows, some days feel like a full-blown circus act. My sister was a true dance prodigy, and from a very young age, schools had already started expressing interest in having her join their programs. That particular weekend, my parents had planned a short trip to visit one of those schools. They left right after lunch on Friday and planned to be back on Sunday as soon as they could. My younger brother, who was only 8 at the time, naturally went with them. I didn't go, not because I couldn't, but because honestly, the idea of staying home alone was way too tempting. To give you an idea of where we lived, it was an area where homes were more like actual farms. Huge properties with land that stretched out for kilometers into the forest. That meant we lived in almost complete isolation. On my mother's side especially, our family had a long and deeply rooted relationship with guns. So from a young age, I was used to seeing them around the house. And more importantly, I knew exactly how to use them. Before leaving, my dad repeated, probably for the 100th time, the 3 golden rules he lived by. Don't react to noises coming from the forest. Don't open the door to anyone. And never, under any circumstances, go outside after dark. Simple rules, but taken very seriously by people who live out there. I told him I was just going to spend the night quietly playing video games and would go to bed early. Which, to be fair, really was my plan. As soon as they left, I followed everything my dad had ever taught me to the letter. I locked all the windows, doors, and any other potential entry points into the house. I saved the living room window for last. A massive window that took up almost an entire wall and was a centerpiece of our home. During the day, it filled the living room with sunlight. At night, we usually closed it, except on full moon nights, when we left the blinds open until the last person went to bed, just to enjoy the view. That night was a new moon, and even though it was dark, there was this strange sort of glow outside that made the forest in the distance look both fascinating and terrifying at the same time. It was a beautiful kind of fear, if that makes any sense. Like a controlled kind of dread that, I'll admit, I sort of enjoyed. I locked all the windows, but since I was planning to hang out in the living room playing games, I left that big one open. I heated up the pizza my parents had left me, plopped down on the couch, and played for hours. Eventually, exhausted and half asleep, I turned off the PlayStation, stayed there on the couch for a few seconds, and of course, I ended up dozing off. I woke up around 4 in the morning with that unbearable feeling that someone was watching me. That's when I realized I'd forgotten to close the blinds. Still groggy, I got up to close them, and saw something that froze me to the core. A handprint on the glass. It looked like someone had pressed their hand against it to peek inside. The moonlight was just enough for me to clearly see the shape of the palm and fingers. I stood there, paralyzed for a few seconds, and then tried to convince myself it could have been a print left by one of my parents from a few days earlier. I closed the blinds, went to my room, and, more out of instinct than actual belief, locked the door behind me. Saturday started off completely normal, with nothing out of the ordinary. I didn't have any real plans, so I invited a friend from school over to hang out for the afternoon. He showed up around 2 and stayed playing games with me well past dinner. When I walked him to the door, I noticed something that made me stop for a second. A pair of footprints in the damp ground outside. It hadn't rained in the morning, but around 4 in the afternoon there had been a light drizzle, which meant those prints had to have been made after he arrived. And neither of us had stepped outside that whole time. That handprint on the glass came rushing back into my mind. Had someone been creeping around the house? I didn't want to show any sign of fear in front of my friend, so I didn't say a word. But the moment he left, I checked and double-checked every door and window, then grabbed one of the guns we kept in the house. Because, no matter how much I tried to convince myself otherwise, it no longer felt like a coincidence. Someone had been out there the night before, watching me while I slept on the couch. I thought about calling my parents, but I didn't want to seem like I couldn't handle it. Or worse, give them a reason to never let me stay home alone again. So I didn't. I tried calming myself with the thought that even if someone had been out there, they were still outside. And that idea gave me a few minutes of comfort. That is, until I started heading up the stairs to my room and noticed a motionless shadow at the top, right in the corner where I used to hide to jump scare my siblings. That's when I knew, without a shred of doubt, I wasn't alone in the house. I gripped the gun tightly, instantly feeling the real weight of what it would mean to pull the trigger on another human being. Without thinking twice, I bolted for the kitchen door that led to the garage, slammed it shut behind me, and bought myself a few precious seconds. I managed to unlock the garage door, jump into my dad's old car, the one he sometimes let me drive. And just as I jammed the key into the ignition, I heard frantic footsteps coming down the stairs, followed by violent bangs on the door. Someone was trying to break it down. I floored it, and in the rearview mirror I saw him, clear as day. A man dressed all in black, stepping through the now broken door. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest, and it's honestly a miracle I didn't cause 2 separate accidents that night, from how badly my hands were shaking. I drove straight to my friend's house, because I had no idea where else to go, and only when I got there did I finally feel like I could breathe again. His dad called the cops and then got in touch with my parents. The police came, looked everything over, but aside from the kitchen door that had been busted open, nothing was broken or out of place. The only thing that confirmed someone had actually been inside was the piece of paper left on my bed. Handwritten on it were the words, "Next time, you won't be so lucky." I ended up living in that house for another 6 years, but I never spent another night there alone. Not me, not anyone. My parents upgraded all the security, and we never had another incident after that. Still, all these years later, thousands of miles away, I get chills every time shadows stretch across the walls of my house. Like for just a moment, I'm 16 again, staring up at the top of the stairs, frozen in place, absolutely sure someone was watching me from the dark. I was born and raised in Alabama, specifically in a small town nestled in the Appalachian Mountains. I always loved living there. The atmosphere was peaceful, the neighbors were friendly, and although strange things happened from time to time, it was never anything serious enough to make me truly dislike this part of the country. To me, it still remains one of the most genuine and unforgettable places a person can grow up. The story I'm about to tell you happened exactly 2 weeks after we moved into a new house, during a time when I was completely alone. For everything to make sense, I need to start from the beginning. My grandparents passed away when I was just 13 years old. I remember the day perfectly. My grandmother went out for a walk in the woods, something she did often, and ended up having a heart attack. My grandfather, maybe from grief or for some other reason we never fully understood, died a few months later in exactly the same way. A heart attack, in the exact same spot, during one of his solitary walks. Back then, no one really looked for deeper explanations or connections between the two deaths. First, because we were all still grieving and trying to come to terms with the loss. And second, because they were both over 85 years old, which made it easier to accept as coincidence. After all, at that age, anything can happen at any time. And in the woods, all it takes is a little scare or a bit of exertion to be fatal. The truth is, aside from my older brother, who never quite accepted the official version, no one really bothered to find a more logical or concrete explanation for what happened. At the time, we were living in a pretty old house, and that's why we decided to move into my grandparents' place. Me, my mom, and my brother, who was 4 years older than me. My grandparents' house, though pretty secluded, was more spacious and relatively more modern, at least compared to our old place. My mom, who'd been a single parent ever since my dad died when I was still a baby, always had to work hard to support us. Sometimes she held down 2, even 3 jobs at once, which meant she was out of the house most of the time. My brother, being older and already having his own group of friends, was also out a lot, especially at night. That left me, just 13, home alone pretty often. Something that, no matter how hard I tried to act grown up and independent, always made me feel a little uneasy. The truth is, I liked our old house better. It was closer to town, and we had neighbors nearby. At my grandparents' house, the backyard backed straight up to the woods, and that always gave me a weird feeling. Like something unseen was watching from the trees. I clearly remember a story from my childhood when my brother had to see the school psychologist because, for weeks, he kept insisting there were creatures living in the forest. They said he had some kind of anxiety disorder, and eventually, he stopped talking about it. Maybe because someone taught him to shut up, or maybe because he realized nobody believed him. But that story never left my mind, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, it was always there, like a shadow in my memory, quietly feeding my anxiety. Back to the night when it all happened. It had been a few weeks since our grandfather had passed, and only 2 weeks since we moved in. I was completely alone. My mom was working a night shift at a bar, and my brother had gone out to a party with some friends. Just so you can picture the house. It has 3 floors and it's built on a small hill. That means the basement is level with the ground at the back of the house, but buried into the hill at the front. If you come in from the backyard, through the woods, you enter directly into the basement and have to go up 2 floors to reach my bedroom. If you come in from the front, you enter straight into the living room and kitchen, and then only have to go up 1 flight of stairs to get to the 2nd floor where I slept. I was lying in bed reading. It was past 11 at night, when I clearly heard the sound of a window opening. I froze instantly. I knew that house well, and I was absolutely certain that if it was a window, it could only be the one in the basement. It was the only sliding window in the house. All the others were old-fashioned ones that opened inward. The basement window had been replaced recently and was different, and I knew for a fact I had locked it. It couldn't be opened from the outside. If it were my mom or my brother, they'd have to come through the door, not the window. I stayed completely still in bed, straining to hear anything else. The silence was total, but my heartbeat was so loud it felt like it was echoing through the entire room. I was just 13, and even though I wanted to be brave, I was alone in a house that still didn't feel like mine, in the middle of a dense, dark forest. I was scared. Really scared. Minutes passed. I don't know how many. And the silence remained. No sounds. I started convincing myself I had imagined it all. I went back to my book, or at least I tried, but I couldn't focus. No matter how many times I read and reread the same page, nothing was sticking. I didn't have a TV or computer in my room at the time, so I just lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to fall asleep. That's when I heard my brother's voice calling me. I jumped, but at the same time, I felt a wave of relief. Maybe it had been him who made the window noise, and I just hadn't heard the door open. I answered him, but got no reply. I called again. Still nothing. I got out of bed and walked to the door. I heard my brother's voice again, calling me. And so I started going down the stairs, following that familiar sound. Halfway down to the basement, I saw the sliding window. Wide open, and in that instant, I knew for sure something was wrong. At that exact moment, I felt something move behind me. I turned around and, up on the top floor, I saw a shadow pass by. I didn't think twice. I bolted through the basement, out the open window, and sprinted across the backyard in a panicked, irrational run until I crashed into my brother and two of his friends, who were just coming in from the woods. He was shocked to see me like that, and immediately started asking what had happened. I told him, still panicking, that someone was inside the house. He tried to calm me down and promised he'd check the house with his friends. They searched the whole house from top to bottom but didn't find a thing. No traces. No marks. No sign of forced entry. Nothing to prove what I had just lived through. I know I was young, and I know I was scared, but I wasn't imagining things. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And what still bothers me to this day, all these years later, is the silence. Even though the house was newer, it still had the old floors from my grandparents' time, and every step made noise. They creaked, echoed. But that night, nothing. Not a single sound. Not a single footstep. Just the open window. And my brother's voice, who wasn't there.